Elias, a man whose face bore the etched lines of 9 lost years, sat on a thin mat meticulously threading stripped plastic bags into a makeshift rope. 9 years. 9 years since the gavel fell. 9 years since his life outside the grey walls ceased to exist. 9 years for a crime he did not commit. He had been a carpenter, a good one, known for his honest work and quiet demeanor in the bustling market town of Bobo-Dioulasso. The charges were theft and assault, a robbery gone. Wrong at the local merchant's house. The evidence was circumstantial, the witness shaky, but in a system often overwhelmed and under-resourced, expediency had prevailed over thoroughness. The routine of prison life had become his reality, the clang of gates, the watery gruel, the hushed conversations, the gnawing ache of injustice. He had appealed, written letters, pleaded his case to anyone who would listen, but the wheels of bureaucracy turned slowly, if at all, for a man with no influence, no connections, just a fading memory of a life stolen. Hope was a fragile bird that had long since flown from his small cold cell. Today, however, there was a different kind of stir in the air. A nervous energy crackled through the corridors. Guards were more numerous, their uniforms crisper. Whispers traveled on the unseen currents of the prison air. A high-profile visit. Rumors varied wildly. A delegation from the capital, international observers, even, improbably, Captain Ibrahim Troare himself. Elias paid little heed. Such events rarely impacted the forgotten men of Cell Block C at the Maison d'Arrêt et de Correction de Ouagadougou, MACO. Yet the whispers solidified into reality. A hush fell over the usual clamor as a small entourage led by the director of prisons made its way down the corridor. And at the center of the group, unmistakable from the official portraits, was Captain Ibrahim Troare. Captain Ibrahim Troare was a leader who had come to power on a wave of public dissatisfaction with corruption and inefficiency. His rhetoric focused on reform, transparency, and justice for all citizens. While his critics accused him of idealism, his supporters saw in him a genuine desire to improve the lives of ordinary people. A visit to the notoriously overcrowded and underfunded Maison d'Arrêt et de Correction de Ouagadougou, MACO, was seen by many as a bold, perhaps even risky move. As the group approached Cell Block C, the director, a portly man sweating despite the cool stone, spoke nervously. "Mr. President, this block houses inmates serving longer sentences. We maintain strict security protocols here." Captain Ibrahim Troare, a man with a sharp gaze and an air of quiet determination, simply nodded. He wasn't here for a photo opportunity. He wanted to see the reality of the system he was tasked with reforming. He stopped at several cells, speaking briefly with inmates, asking about their conditions, their work assignments, their families. The guards shifted uncomfortably, unused to such direct interaction between the head of state and the incarcerated. Then he reached Elias's cell. Elias looked up, surprised by the attention. He didn't plead, didn't shout his innocence. 9 years of silence had taught him the futility of it. He simply met his gaze, his eyes holding a depth of sorrow and quiet resignation that spoke volumes. Captain Ibrahim Troare paused. He wasn't sure what held his attention, the man's still dignity, the profound sadness in his eyes, or perhaps a subtle flicker of something unbroken. He stepped closer to the bars. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the stifling air. "Elias, Mr. President," he replied, his voice hoarse from disuse and emotion. "And how long have you been here, Elias?" 9 years, Mr. President." He looked at the worn mat, the barren cell. "What was your trade?" "Carpenter," he said, a faint hint of pride in his voice. "In Bobo-Dioulasso." The director, hovering nearby, interjected smoothly, "He was convicted of theft and assault, Mr. President. A violent crime." Captain Ibrahim Troare didn't take his eyes off Elias. "Were you given a fair trial?" Elias hesitated, then spoke with a quiet intensity that surprised even himself. "I maintained my innocence, Mr. President. The evidence, it was weak." The witness, confused. "But I had no one to speak for me, no resources to fight." Something in his demeanor, the lack of anger or compassion, The quiet certainty in his voice resonated with him. Captain Ibrahim Troare had met countless people since taking office, heard endless petitions and stories, but there was something about Elias that felt true. "Director," he said, turning his sharp gaze to the sweating man, "I want the file on Elias from Bobo-Dioulasso, his full case history, on my desk by tomorrow morning." The director paled slightly. "Mr. President, that may be difficult. Records from that long ago." "Make it happen." His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. He looked back at Elias. "I will look into this, Elias. I cannot promise anything, but I will look into it." A flicker, a tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of that fragile bird of hope stirred in Elias's chest. He simply nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "Thank you, Mr. President." The entourage moved on, the ripple of their passage slowly fading. Elias was left in the dust motes and the gloom, but something had shifted. A tiny crack had appeared in the solid rock of his despair. True to his word, Captain Ibrahim Troare received Elias's file the next morning. It was thick with brittle, yellowing papers, smudged carbon copies and handwritten notes. He spent hours poring over it, his initial intuition nagging at him. The investigation seemed rushed, key alibis weren't thoroughly checked, and the witness testimony, when read closely, was indeed contradictory and vague. There were mentions of political pressure at the time to secure a quick conviction to appease a fearful merchant community. Elias, the quiet carpenter with no connections, had been an easy target. As the days turned into a week, Captain Ibrahim Troare became increasingly convinced of Elias's innocence. He privately commissioned a review by a small, trusted team of legal experts who confirmed his suspicions. The evidence was nowhere near sufficient to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The system had failed Elias, spectacularly and tragically. The weight of this realization pressed down on him. 9 years. 9 years of a man's life, stolen by apathy and procedural failures. This wasn't just a statistic. This was a human being, incarcerated unjustly within the very system he was meant to uphold. Taking a deep breath, Captain Ibrahim Troare made the decision. This wouldn't be a quiet bureaucratic correction. This needed to be a clear message. He scheduled an unannounced visit to the courthouse in Bobo-Dioulasso. The news spread like wildfire, drawing a crowd and a swarm of local and national press. Standing on the steps of the courthouse, the symbol of the justice system that had failed Elias, Captain Ibrahim Troare addressed the nation. "My fellow citizens," he began, his voice clear and strong, "I stand before you today with a heavy heart. Our justice system, the bedrock of our society, is designed to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. But today, we must confront a truth that is both difficult and necessary. Sometimes, despite our best intentions, the system errs." He recounted Elias's case, detailing the flaws in the original investigation and trial, the flimsy evidence, and the 9 years of wrongful imprisonment. He didn't sensationalize, but laid out the facts with a quiet gravity that underscored the seriousness of the injustice. Elias was failed by the system, he stated, his gaze sweeping across the assembled faces. He was failed by a rushed process, by inadequate representation, and by a lack of thoroughness. For 9 years, an innocent man has been robbed of his freedom, his livelihood, and his life outside these walls. He paused, the silence amplifying his next words. Today, we begin to rectify this wrong. Effective, immediately, Elias's conviction is quashed. He is a free man. A ripple of gasps and murmurs went through the crowd. This was unprecedented. Captain Ibrahim Troare then announced the establishment of a special commission to review past convictions where there were credible claims of wrongful imprisonment, prioritizing long-serving inmates with questionable case histories. He also pledged to implement reforms to improve legal aid for indigent defendants and mandate stricter standards for evidence handling and witness testimony. Later that day, Captain Ibrahim Troare, accompanied by a small discreet group, returned to the Maison d'Arrêt et de Correction de Ouagadougou, MACO. This time his visit was expected, but the atmosphere was still charged with anticipation. They went directly to cell block C. Elias was brought to a small bare room. He was unsure what to expect. Another appeal denied? A transfer to a different prison? The door opened, and Captain Ibrahim Troare stood there, not behind bars this time, but a few feet away, a look of solemn determination on his face. "Elias," he said softly, "I am Captain Ibrahim Troare. I have reviewed your case. The system failed you." Tears welled in Elias's eyes, blurring his image. 9 years of suppressed emotion threatened to overwhelm him. "Your conviction has been quashed," he continued, a small, compassionate smile touching his lips. "You are free to go." He couldn't speak, could only stare at him, the words echoing in his ears. Free. The word felt alien, fragile, almost unreal. Captain Ibrahim Troare stepped forward and, in a simple, deeply human gesture, extended his hand. Elias, his hand trembling, reached out and took it. His grip was firm, grounding. "There are no adequate words to apologize for what you have endured," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But we will do everything we can to help you rebuild your life." Arrangements had been made. A lawyer was present to guide him through the immediate formalities of release. Support services for housing, job training, and psychological counseling were already being organized. It wouldn't erase the 9 years, nothing could, but it was a start. Walking out of the prison gates with Captain Ibrahim Troare by his side, Elias blinked in the bright sunlight. The world outside was louder, faster, and more vibrant than he remembered. He was thinner, older, marked by his time inside. But he was free. News of Elias's release spread rapidly, sparking national conversations about justice, accountability, and the fallibility of even the most well-intentioned systems. For some, it was a moment of hope, proof that reform was possible, and that their leader was willing to confront uncomfortable truths. For others, it highlighted the systemic issues that allowed such injustices to occur in the first place. Captain Ibrahim Troare's action was debated, analyzed, and scrutinized. Was it a political move? A genuine act of compassion? Perhaps a complex combination of both. But for Elias, standing in the sunlight, taking his first free breaths in 9 years, it was simply the moment his stolen life began, tentatively to be returned. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but for the first time in nearly a decade, Elias had more than just dust motes dancing in a single shaft of light. He had the daunting, exhilarating vastness of the sky. If this powerful story of justice and redemption moved you, subscribe to my channel for more narratives that explore the depths of human experience.